what appeared in the latest Age Science published by the SSE. There's a book advertisement in there on Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. I can hardly believe this book was advertised there, because that book has meant a lot to me over the years. Then, in walking around the bookstores recently, I noticed that there's an incredible amount of literature appearing in the holistic areas, in the alternative medicine, and in general on wellness having to do with Kundalini. So I thought it might be an interesting topic to bring into here, even though I see it overlaps with some of the other talks. Now, my own involvement in these interesting fields began, so part of my talk is kind of a summary and a little bit of an odyssey, but my interest began really in 1970 when I became really aware of psi phenomenon, dreams, and also Kundalini. So I'll be focusing in this talk on mainly Kundalini and how it might overlap with some of the other dreams and psi material. What is Kundalini? Many of you know and some of you don't. It's a Sanskrit word that really means coiled, something compressed like a spring. And it is generally thought of in a model from the ancient yoga traditions, which goes back to the Indus Valley, as something that lies dormant at the base of the spine. So it's really a latent energy in their model. And this can actually be activated or awakened is their term. And when this energy, which then becomes kind of a flow of energy, termed prana, surges up the spine and energizes several areas of the spine, which are identified in the literature defined as wheels or chakras. And the ultimate goal is to activate and balance all these various chakras, including up to at least 7 or more. And in the process of this, it's filtered into the entire yoga literature. You will find this model and chakras and Kundalini in almost every yoga literature that you can find. Now, there's a systematic process involved here in most of the traditions, that these chakras are energized in a systematic manner. And by energizing, I mean the concept is that they're like vortices of energy that get ducted into these various body parts, and they energize that area of the body, whether it's the base of the spine, the gut area, the heart area, the throat area, or a center in the brain, in the forehead, in the pineal gland area. So there's this concept that requires the idea of energizing. So the prana, as it flows through the body and then goes through the top of the head, is envisioned to also be re-energized in the cosmos, in the universe, and comes back into the body to recycle again if necessary to achieve this balancing. And a central feature here is the connection to the cerebrospinal system and the various glands. So it's a huge activation process involving the concept of vortices of circulating high energy processes, which in some literature is considered to be virtual and in other cases more literal. There are two ways of looking at Kundalini that I like to consider. The classical yoga-derived version, which assumes that there's a process going on here where there's a unity or a balance being developed between the body, the mind, and the spirit. So all these three have to be integrated and balanced together. There's a little bit of Jungian psychology here in terms of balance, which I see in the literature as well, and many writers are even referring to Jung on some of these processes. The other way of looking at Kundalini is to not be too concerned about the cosmology or the mythology, as some people would say, associated with the Hindu version, but only looking at the physiology, the phenomenology. And this is really what I'm going to take a look at here, because I wasn't particularly interested in the cosmic journey as I was in trying to understand what is the physiology going on. Now, here are some brief examples of how people who have spontaneous experiences and also react to what's called a Kundalini awakening. Those that go through a process of learning and teaching from yogas don't really have the dramatic surge. It's balanced so you don't get this jolt of energy. Or if it happens, it's done very gradually. The problem arises to people like in this culture that never heard of the term before. And all of a sudden they're thrusted in to an amazing feelings of energy in their own body that can actually include all these sensations. The feeling of a powerful electric field, intense light, head pressures, vibrations, a whole list of things that happen spontaneously to people. Then they wonder what's going on. They go to a psychiatrist and begin to give them pills, when it's really part of a Kundalini awakening process to balance their entire body from the point of view of wellness and unity. Now, here's some typical words you can look at. I'm not going to read them too much. Those that have no idea what Kundalini meant, later on learn about it. Do talk about tingling, whistling, high-pitched noises. And this includes male scientists, academic people. It usually leads into something like precognitive experiences or dreams or healing. The bottom one is this female artist that talks about vibrations in the head, tight band, all kinds of energy up and down the spine. Contrast that to the yoga, to the shaman literature, and you'll find striking similarities, where in the shaman traditions from Africa, you can see words like tingling. You develop remote vision. That sounds like remote viewing. And you can see over vast distances. Or the backbone. There's something sticking me in the back that's running up and down my spine, tingling. Or the Eskimo, or I should say the Inuit shaman, then sees this light entering his head, which seems to open up a perspective into the future, precognition. Now, my involvement here is from dreams. I went through one of these experiences having no idea what was going on. But I was alerted, although I didn't catch the alerting until afterwards. I was alerted through dreams, being flooded by tsunamis, being charged with electricity that felt like I was being electrocuted, and there's no way I could anticipate what this all meant. The biggest significant thing in my life in 1973 was the feeling of being electrocuted, the feeling of having electrical tornadoes surge up and down me, and my brain seemed to be filled with tiny electrical tornadoes. And I just recently received an email from a woman that described the identical situation, so I've been working with her. I've also been working with people that have been struck by lightning and survived. And as a result of this lightning strike, almost immediately they go into a Kundalini-type episode and have no idea what's going on. They attribute it to some malfunction in the brain, which what I think happening, and just open up the avenues in the brain to be conduits to this Kundalini energy. As a result of this experience, this made me a 90-degree turn from being an aerospace engineer and physicist into saying, hey, what's going on here? So I began studying psi. In those days, I just had a generic term. I like to use it, conscious state and dream state. I looked into healing. I joined healing groups. I found that even my own self, whenever I was really sick, I could experience accelerated healing by reimagining the experience and allowing that energy to flow through me. And it really felt really quite energetic. So it was kind of a healing process that was going on. And I kind of saw it as kind of a balance, as kind of some kind of harmony was being developed within my heart, aorta, brain, heart system, because I could feel these vibrations. And I really now think that the heart EKG vibrations in the blood vessels and the EEG patterns become synchronized. And this somehow helps focus and direct whatever it is you need to direct, whether it's healing or psi phenomenon. When I became involved in SRI, I did manage to do one experiment while I was still with the project before I was told not to do this. Managers don't do this kind of stuff. So what I did here was take a look at the possibility of applying Kundalini sensations to improving the accuracy of RV data. This was a submarine experiment we did early on in 1977. There were 6 target pictures in the sub. It was my task to describe which one of the 3 were being chosen randomly when the submarine, submersible, was 500 feet below sea level and 500 miles away. Double blind. Nobody's opening the envelope to look at it. So this was my first impression. I was able to relax real quickly. I'd never done this before. But I assumed that this harmonizing process that I felt in my brain had a connection with tuning in to psi phenomena. So I was able to induce that feeling, those vibrations, and relaxed very easily because it's a very relaxing process. Stress reduction is very good just from a health wellness point of view. And the first impressions, bright gold coils, curvy lines, looks like typical remote viewing data, and it is. Then the woman shows up, a golden-haired woman, and a face of a ape or gorilla. Several days later, I had to choose which of the 6 pictures were the target. There was no choice. There was a blonde-haired woman facing a gorilla. so the experiment worked. There were other projects too that I was involved in. I'll skip over real quickly. And I was able to integrate both the conscious state psi remote viewing with the dream state. And in this case, the person that put together the target pool made an error and had pictures on the backside. In the dream state, I was able to actually dream that backside picture quite accurately, and I didn't know that until much later. There was a third picture. In this case, I went to a dream. The pattern and the ending of the dream matched only this one, so it was a hit. I learned from this experiment that where is the target? I finally realized that it's not where we think it is, that it is some representative space. So I began to think in terms of holography, and that this target itself is being accessed through the mind into some kind of holographic representation of reality. I put that to the test with precognition, and I started looking at the future when nobody knows the target is not even existing yet. And I'm going to have one example of that because I was able to induce the sensations that I felt were conducive to this frequency setting harmony, for lack of a better term, that occurred as I was sitting there concentrating on a task. And that was this. On the night of January the 27th, decided to have a dream about the most significant event for the next week. I was able to induce the feeling. I went to sleep. Late that morning, I had these two very brief images. You can see them right here. Thin band of turbulence, high velocity streaks. An airplane pops out of one of the streaks, and then the dream presents a still. I'm now looking at a still photograph in the dream, and a spotlight comes on, and this is the way some of my dreams work. They spotlight the area, and it illuminates that spot. And I could see when it illuminated that there was a crack at the window, at the wing junction in the dream. Okay, 5 days later is the tragic situation with the shuttle when it burned up in reentry over Texas. So that sketch of streaks in the sky matches that traumatic incident. Later, when I got ground truth on what really caused the accident, that sketch, that still photograph in the dream, does correlate very nicely to the eventual analysis. And this is 5 days before the tragedy occurred. Another thing I did was just try to see whether or not, through the dream state, insight could be provided into the process. What are my main interests? So over time, I was able to develop a model that involved hexagons. Hexagons showed up in two-dimensional, three-dimensional forms, and they existed until seconds after I woke up. There's something about hexagons. So you can imagine my excitement when I read Stuart Hemmerroth's work about noticing the hexagonal patterns in microtubules and his model, along with Penrose, on how these microtubules throughout the brain actually form some kind of quantum computing mechanism. This could be pure chance, but you never know. It's kind of interesting. So, where did I get to after all these years from 1970? I think from the point of view of the psi consciousness connection that it is analogous to holograms. Maybe that's my laser background showing. Maybe I'm biased there, but it sure seems holographic to me. And that the psi process is a link, whatever that is, that allows us to connect with that hologram that's out there in space somewhere. And wherever it is, I call it an information domain. I don't like to think in terms of alternative universes or whatever some of the quantum physicists here do. It just is. It just is there. And it represents 3D reality. You and I are in it. We have a holographic body embedded in that. I think the previous speaker told about an astral body. I use the term holographic body. It has a projection feature. That's where precognition can come from. And we can look into the future as a projection, as a virtual possibility, but not as an absolute thing. There's probabilities involved, and this is why I don't like to go too much further into the future than a few weeks, because in my view, the probability really falls off. So stick with the near term, and you'll be more likely to be correct. And that intentions can alter this. You heard that from the healing talk earlier. I see this connected to the PK work and affecting some kind of form structure on that hologram that then comes back into this reality, moving from point A to point B, like in poltergeist phenomenon. In terms of the Kundalini, whatever the term you want to use, bioenergy, Kundalini-like energy, Non-local energy is being used now by some of the yoga practitioners. That it links with psi consciousness in some way. But the main thing for you and I is that it really does enhance wellness and creativity. It really does. It's wonderful. The energy that you feel really is truly constructive. It has a role in survival. So you can see that. And I think also evolution, but I'm not quite sure how it links to the DNA. And I really do believe there's an electric magnetic field component and that interacts with the quantum, probably at very small microscopic levels in the brain that can be measured. And also, I think clues we can find on this from looking at processes, MEG work, magnetoencephalograms should be able to point out where these fine-grained electric tornadoes are that might be creating noise-free environments within the brain that can help these other processes become effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Questions coming down around this way?
Try and stay close to the mic this time. Okay. Dale, I'm wondering if what I assume is a holographic field. Apparently, that's what you're describing.
That's my closest analogy.
Do you see any relationship between that and Edgar Cayce's Akashic records?
Not really. It's a matter of how you store information. Years ago, you carved things in rocks, the cave walls paintings. The Akashic Records has the concept of a library that you can access, pulling out books. Okay, it's information storage. It's our modern way of looking how this esoteric information, which I don't think is that esoteric, is actually recorded. So we use lasers and holography now. 10 years from now, we might change that concept.
Hi, excuse me, Dr. Thomas Beck from Seattle, Washington. I'm a psychologist, and my partner and I have worked fairly extensively with individuals having Kundalini awakenings that have been triggered by a wide range of different things. And you're talking about the creativity that really comes to the fore. It's a very complex process. Yes. But I wanted to comment about the vortexes.
Yes.
In particular, you said electrical tornadoes.
It's a metaphor, yes.
A metaphor.
But it might be real. I think it's real.
But they're often portrayed as double vortexes.
Oh, I didn't know about the double. Okay.
Yeah, going both directions.
Okay.
And if you look at a lot of like astronomical images of planetary nebulae, they call it, they'll often be double rotating vortexes. Okay. And vortexes also are pretty much, as far as I can determine, the main way that energy is transduced throughout the universe, whether you're talking about Bose-Einstein condensates on the microscopic scale, where they form spontaneously when you reach that critical temperature, all the way up to tornadoes, which we almost had here yesterday, to cosmological processes.
I think you guys need to take this offline at the end of the talk. We have a couple of people and only a couple of minutes.
I'd like to get your card.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, we're recording. Yes, in fact, the vortices kind of remind me of a lot of things. Anyway, go ahead.
I would like to ask if, given the more than the 1+1 effect by the healers in the previous talk with regard to the subtle bodies or your holographic body idea, had you considered, is anybody experimenting with, as a corollary to remote viewing teams doing, for instance, the Mars work, looking for instance, on a re-entry vehicle, a team of people looking at the condition of the vehicle and then attempting to heal any wounds on the surface of the vehicle?
I'm not aware of any perceived, say, precognitive thing in an attempt to intervene, other than what we could do ourselves, if it has to do with something we need to do to get out of harm's way. So I'm not aware of anything like that, but it sounds like a parallel to healing. Yes, thank you. Okay.
East Indian mysticism identifies a dynamic between the Kundalini energy and the chakras.
Yes.
Where the chakras, unknown to a lot of people who try to study this, that the chakras are actually blocked energy vortices that are not flowing up and down the spine for the supposedly normal state. Have you seen any of that dynamic in your work?
Yes, I have worked with people that come to me for a number of reasons, and they do run into what I can, in this model, see resistances, whether it be what's called the heart chakra or some other area, that then through a little bit of a therapy can be circumvented or balanced or unblocked. So there is that concept. And
Okay, you do see energy stuck in a chakra that then is allowed to flow?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a metaphor or real, but there is something that represents a blockage, a resistance, or something that we're out of balance in, very much the Jungian psychology. How do we receive or go back to a balanced situation? You know, we do too much of one thing and not enough another. So it's something like that, the way I see it. A balancing process.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dale.
Okay. Yes.
I'll pick your pocket.
Maybe you won't want it after where I stuck it.